Get ready to listen, learn, and earn CE hours. This podcast features content from an accredited CE activity provided by Calibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits.
Well, welcome back, ladies. We're here for episode 2 of CRPS, and I wanted to just let everybody know, if you didn't see episode 1, be sure to go back and watch it. In episode 1, we talked about Judah's journey from diagnosis to remission, highlighting her physical, emotional, and mental challenges that she and her mother faced along the way. In episode 2, we are going to talk more about the patient's experience and provide insights, emphasizing the role of healthcare professionals in supporting patients throughout this journey. So ladies, if you're all set, we will dive right back on in.
I'm all set. Judah, how about you?
I'm Judah, good. You're the most important one, Judah. You all set?
I'm good.
All right. So to both of you, how is the experience of managing an invisible illness where symptoms aren't always visible to others? How is that differed from managing a visible chronic illness where they are more apparent?
I used an analogy last episode saying you wouldn't tell somebody in a wheelchair to pretend they can walk. And I feel like that's one of the biggest differences with dealing with an invisible illness is the way people react to it. If they can't see something wrong with you, a lot of people are like, then there must be nothing wrong with you. Mm-hmm. It's the act of having to see that there's something physically wrong. And so you have the good side of people who are actually sympathetic and who actually want to help. You have the side of people who immediately look for something they can see. And if that has to be a doctor blaming my mom for doing something to me, or if that just has to be a person telling me to pretend it's not real, or that it's all in my head and I'm making it up.
Yeah.
How about you, Candace?
She's talking about, are you talking about one of the ER visits where the doctor came in and was like, where's her split? And I said, you didn't put her in a split. So in the beginning of our journey, we didn't know that it was CRPS yet, but we had kind of, had an idea. But we were with just a regular orthopedic clinic on base, on a military base. And we were just moving to Florida at this time. And she was screaming in pain. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So in the very beginning, we went to the ER probably 3 or 4 different times trying to be like, what is happening? This is not normal. This is not a strain. Yeah. Why is she screaming like she's dying? And so we're, one of the orthopedics that we hadn't even seen this particular one, but he comes down from the clinic because he was on call. And his first words out of his mouth are, well, where's her splint? So my words back to him were, you didn't put her in a splint. So he leaves the room and sends somebody down to put her in a splint, which I did end up cutting off probably 24 hours later because she's still screaming in pain. And I'm like, this is not working. So I would say in the beginning, it was really hard because most people with CRPS will tell you that they have gone to the emergency room multiple times. And eventually you start, I'm sure people start questioning you, like, why are they back? What is going on with this? And no, there's really something wrong and we don't know what this is. And I don't know if anybody has seen there's a show that Judah and I finally did sit down and watch. It was on Netflix, and it was about a little girl with CRPS and her family, and how the hospital treated the family and the mother and took their little girl away and tried to accuse them of something that wasn't true because she had an invisible illness. She had CRPS. And so it's really hard in the beginning. So my biggest advice is to make sure that you educate yourself and be prepared and be ready. Have those notes, what you've done, what you haven't done, but you also have to find those physicians that are going to fight with you. And we had a really amazing pediatric orthopedic who just really wanted to fix her. He knew that something was wrong. And I remember him just sitting on the side of the bed being like, I've done everything I can do. There is nothing for me to fix. And he's the one that helped us get to our first treatment center. But I think that's what's really hard. When somebody has a break or somebody has something visible, like it's seen, it's known, people know what to do about that. People are really uncomfortable when you have an invisible illness. I mean, friends are uncomfortable, so out in public it's uncomfortable. Or you have people who say, well, she was just running. Well, yeah, she can run and she can walk, but they don't understand the pain, they don't understand the disease, they've never looked into it, but they just see her and they're like, oh, she's fine. But if
Mm-hmm.
you really know her, like I said in that note, like if you really know her, you see those subtle signs that she's not fine. She is just trying to continue to live and not let
Right.
CRPS win in those moments. And I think that's what's the hardest.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned something that leads me to my next question, Candace, and about other people's perceptions
Yeah.
or misunderstandings of the illness. And how did that affect you and your family, particularly in social or public settings? And Judah, you did talk a little bit about this in episode 1, where you said like you would be crying and like, or your friends would try and help you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Do you know what I'm referring back to? How you were saying like your friend would try to help you, like they didn't understand what was wrong with you.
Yeah, there's been multiple instances where things like that can occur. I feel like a lot of it was in middle school. We went through middle school where the people you meet in 6th grade, you're going to know for the rest of your 3 years in middle school. And so you live in a middle school where everyone's going to know your name at that point. And I feel like one of the biggest things was like walking in there like on a cast and stuff and then having a physical thing. A lot of people notice that because I'm walking in a cast and an e-scooter like walking around. But, like, when the cast is off, even the people that I have told the CRPS about, a lot of them forget it exists or forget that I have an issue now that they don't see anything wrong.
Sure.
And, like, there's a few kids who will remember, and those are gonna be more your, like, closest friends. But even then, half the time, they're not actually seeing you're in pain because you've either gotten too good at hiding it or they can't read you as well, unless it's a really bad day and you're actively showing it. So it was definitely a lot harder in the friend department, and it got to the point where I didn't want to bring up the fact I had CRPS or any of that around kids at school, and I wanted to separate that from my school life, which was hard when it was like always hurting. But I didn't want to wear things that would show that I had something wrong with me to school. I didn't want to leave the room and use like the 504 plan that I had in place for stuff like that, because then it gave attention to the fact there was something wrong with me. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
already experienced enough with people looking at me weirdly after it or treating me differently or just forgetting it existed in the first place, which really hurts when you realize people you've told have completely forgotten about it and you still end up getting kicked in the foot.
Oh.
Yep.
How about for you, Candace, too? Like, how did it affect you and your family, in social settings? Like, do you have any stories?
Well, I think for us, it would limit how much we went out because we didn't want to take her somewhere and she's struggling and, in a lot of pain. But when we would go
Sure.
out, she would take a book. She would, have something to try to distract her. And she would remove herself as it got worse, as the pain continued to get worse, because it got to a point where we were like, we have to do something. Like, this is not getting better. It is getting worse. And we have to find something else. And so we started researching, and there was a clinic that has, like, they specialize in CRPS, and they won't say that you're cured. They will say that you're in remission, and they fight with you and for you. But because it is so non-traditional, insurance doesn't cover it, um, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's more of just it's invisible, so people don't understand. People don't believe you. People see the opposite of what you described because they don't know her. We stopped traveling because it was so, and we love to travel and be a military family. Like your parents live, far away, and so you have to drive, and we just it was so hard on her, and she would struggle for days after we would get somewhere that it wasn't worth it anymore. So we really
Right.
became more homebound, so to say, like choosing to not make her go out in those places and really restrict, it kind of restricts what you can do as a family and where you can go. Um, and even with family, I mean, family is the same way. Like, my parents were amazing as far as coming and seeing what Judah was going through and being a part of what Judah was going through. Because if you don't see it, you don't
Yep.
understand it and you don't know it. And so when we say things like, hey, we're not traveling anymore, then we can't get to you because it is so hard for her in the car. But like I said, if you don't see it, you don't know it. So
Yeah.
when you go out in public, when you're with your friends, if they don't see it, they don't understand. And it's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard to have a connection when you don't understand what they're going through.
Sure. Well, now that you're adjusting to life in remission for both of you and your family, can you describe the emotional journey you've experienced? Candace, for you as a parent, from the initial diagnosis to hearing about her remission.
Such an emotional roller coaster. You go from like just wanting to scream, like want this to go away, to being excited that she got her life back and that she's enjoying life again. um it's really hard to process it. And I will say, when you
Yeah.
adjust from this chronic illness of like, this is how life was to this is how life is, and you're by yourself, it's hard to process. And as a healthcare provider, there's nobody there to help you process that. Like, I couldn't go out and meet with like a psychiatrist or, a mental health provider, because they're all booked, because when remission happens, remission happens. So
Sure.
there's no like help with processing. And I think it takes
Yeah.
time to really chew on that. You're excited. Don't get me wrong. Like, I am so excited, but it's a lot of, it's a huge emotional roller coaster to process. And I remember being at the clinic that we were just at, where she went into remission, and was talking about some of the things that were going on. And a mom who's going through this too, she said, you can only heal one thing at a time. And I was like, you are so right. Because when you are going through something like this as a parent, your stress levels are through the roof. Like, you are
Right.
constantly researching, how can I fix her? What can I do for her? Checking in on them. Being all that you can be for them, encouraging her not to let this, not to let this take over her life. And then you go to like, and so it's just, it's a lot. It's a huge transition. It's a good transition, but emotionally it's a lot. I wasn't prepared for what it would be
Sure.
like to go from,
How could you be?
yeah, like, it's a lot. Your emotions are all over the place. But then you get to also focus on healing yourself and taking
Hmm.
deep breaths and getting your cortisol levels down and your stress levels down and eating healthy and being present instead of surviving. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I have learned, that I wish that I had latched onto, was, during that 2 years and 10 months, I felt like we were really just surviving.
Right.
We weren't thriving, we were surviving. And that was our life. And what I should have been doing is figuring out how to presently live, how to live in the present, rather than
It's hard to do
just,
that in the moment, though.
rather than just trying to figure out how to survive through this day.
Hmm.
Because even though that was hard, one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, it was still life. Life doesn't stop.
Sure.
I think that's my biggest lesson that I took from this.
And what's amazing about this story is that not only did Judah get her life back, but I feel like you did as well. It's just, it's a beautiful story, Judah. I'm so happy for you. Candace, how has your life changed for your family since receiving the remission diagnosis?
Trying to figure out our new normal, being able
Sure.
to travel and what we can do. And I think that's our biggest thing, is we were a family that loved to travel, weren't we, Judah?
Uh-huh.
And so,
Where was the first place you guys are going to go?
so we went and saw some friends in Montgomery. She's going to go to aviation challenge camp. And this time she
Cool.
gets to go pain free. She got a scholarship to go. So she's going to that. And she's getting to do all these things that she has always wanted to do pain free. We live by the
Mm-hmm.
beach, so we get to go to the beach and she can run on the sand. And I think we went to the beach the first weekend we got home, didn't we? We ran on the sand. When we were told she was in remission, one of the things our family loves to do is go on the boat. And we hadn't really been able to enjoy the boat because the vibrations and stuff from the boat were so hurtful for Judah. And so we put the boat in that weekend, and she got up on water skis. Like first time
Wow.
out in the water. And so we put her to the test to make sure like this is remission, and it is sticking. And so, but we're able to do these things that we love to do as a family, but we couldn't really spend a lot of time because number one, we didn't want to leave Judah by herself. And
Right.
we wanted to do things we could do as a family, but we wanted her to be able to enjoy life again. And that's really the biggest thing that has changed, is Judah gets to enjoy life now.
So talking about adjustments then, I mean, there any other or really big adjustments besides like no traveling and not really going out as much that you feel like you had to make as a parent?
I would say as a parent with 3 kids, when you have one who has something chronic, it's hard to not just be focused on her. And I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't say forget your other children, because you don't forget them. It's just that the time and energy that is spent taking care of a chronically ill child takes away from your other children. And so for me, it was, how do I make sure that I'm giving my other daughters what they need? How am I meeting the needs of Judah, but I'm also making sure I'm meeting the needs of everybody else in our house? And that's really hard, because even as a parent with a child with a chronic illness, you're tired too. The emotional exhaustion. No, I don't have the pain that she has. You have that emotional exhaustion, that mental exhaustion of
Uh-huh.
trying to fix it. How can I fix it? And you carry that, and that is hard.
Absolutely. How about you, Judah? Let's talk about how you adjusted to life after living with a chronic condition and then suddenly not having it.
Yeah, I really adjusted to living with it by just learning to separate myself from the world using books or music and to really just avoid it. And the other adjustment was ended up keeping it hidden or separate from school as well. And so having to adjust to that and having to adjust to still having to get up in the morning even while dealing with this pain. And actually right after we ended up getting CRPS, we ended up moving here. And so before we got our diagnosis, it was CRPS. We were in the process of moving to Florida. So I ended up starting in a brand new place with a disease we still really knew nothing about that was continuing to get worse a whole lot more. And so you're having to adjust to a completely new environment where you know like really absolutely nobody. At the same time dealing with something you know absolutely nothing about at the moment. And it was definitely a hard adjustment, and it wasn't something I was prepared for. And it led to a stage of introvertedness in my life where I basically cut myself off from everybody. And so while I did know a lot of people at school, there were very few I could still legitimately call friends.
Judah, is there a challenging part of the transition from having a chronic illness to being in remission? Was there something challenging about making that swap back or that you could talk about?
Um, it's I described this a little bit earlier, but it's now having to get used to normal pain because I'll
Yeah.
get random normal pains at some of the most randomest times, and I'm over here like, what the heck is happening? And so it's getting used to that because normal pains happen every day for some reason. And now I'm having to refigure those out because I've completely forgotten what it's like to even not have constant pain, let alone feel
Yeah.
normal pain for once. So it was definitely a big challenge with that. And I feel like the other challenge is having to remind myself there's nothing wrong with me anymore. Because there's always that big fear it's going to come back, or that if I do something, if I like injure it again, it's gonna re-stress it to the point I'll have to deal with this all over again. And I don't think I'd be able to handle having to deal with another 3 years of my life being taken up by so much pain. And it was definitely some of the biggest challenges coming back. And I think one of the other challenges is the idea of remembering how I'm supposed to act without pain. Because I mean, I closed myself off for a while. It's having to like reopen back up and re-experience what the world is like without pain.
So that leads me to my next question for you, Judah. Has your daily routine changed since being in remission? Have you added more things in?
Yeah, this was something that I actually worried about a lot when I was in treatment. Well, my final treatment for remission. And it's kind of one of those things when you're like expecting remission to create this huge change and suddenly everything's going to be different. But no, when you come back, it's the same house, it's the same people, it's the same room, it's that you've lived in for the past 3 years with the pain. It's the same area, it's the same town, it's the same people you've spent your entire 3 years of this around. But you come back, and while the routine is the same, it's also different because now I'm not struggling to put shoes on in the morning because it hurts. I'm not struggling to pull myself out of bed because I know the minute I leave this bed, the pain's coming back full force. It's no longer having to worry about this pain stabbing me or causing me to almost fall because it decided to give out on me randomly while walking down the stairs. And it's like it defies all your expectations in the ways of what you're expecting to happen and the ways of what you're not expecting to happen. But it's also something wonderful. And it's really an amazing feeling.
She sat beside me. She sat beside me in the pool one day, and she was just sitting, dangling her legs in the water. And before, she could not have done anything like that at all. And she said, I have to remind myself that I can do this and it's not going to hurt. And it's just something that sticks in my mind as her sitting beside me with her feet in the water. It seems so simple to most parents, like, oh, my kids do that all the time. But the pain from the allodynia that CRPS causes, she couldn't even handle the air blowing over her leg, much less water.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, just something you take for granted or just don't even think about. Judah, were there any challenges that you faced while adjusting to post-life treatment that sticks out to you?
I think it is kind of weird not having the same routine that I had while during treatment because, like, treatment, you kind of fall into this routine of what you're doing and how you're working toward it. And you're coming back here and you don't have that same routine anymore because now you're just trying to figure out how to live life. Because I've had, like, a treatment routine since we really got this diagnosis. Since from when I started my first treatment to just going through basic physical therapy to just coming back and starting this brand new treatment that ultimately put me in remission. And so it's like a loss of comfort in the idea you have a set routine, but it's also you're gaining the comfort of knowing that it's not coming back and that you just defeated something that's been with you for so long.
I think one of the biggest challenges too for both of us, and Judah, and I'll let you piggyback on this, is we were at a place that we just left where she actually went into remission, but there were so many people who had CRPS and who were dealing with this of all ages and from all over the world. She actually learned how to do the Rubik's Cube by, was he from Ireland?
He was from Ireland.
He was from Ireland, and he had CRPS in his arm. He couldn't even move his arm, and he pulled out a Rubik's Cube and said, hey, I did my dissertation on the algorithms for a Rubik's Cube, and he taught her how to do a Rubik's Cube. But saying all of that to say, like, we had a support group. We loved each other. We worked with each other. We cried with each other in the parking lot of the clinic. We went to dinners together. We knew what each other was going through and supported each other through all these challenges. And then you go into remission and it almost feels like you're ripped away from this community that you developed and go home. And you're going home to people who haven't been what you've been through and who don't understand what you've been through. And you miss that community that you had at the clinic where all these people understood. They just understood. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us coming home and getting back into our normal routine of living.
Right. So Candace, that's actually what I want to talk to both of you about next was the emotional and social aspects of having a chronic illness, how it affects you now that you're in remission and what you might not have anticipated during treatment. So that maybe you may have just answered that question with the community that you surrounded
Yes,
yourself with.
absolutely. The community was such a big part, I think, of even going into remission. But I'll say that when I walked into the clinic, because she was there for 4 weeks, 4 months and 2 weeks, and we had no idea when she was going to leave. And so we did some split, like Blake stayed with her the first bit. My parents went up for a couple weeks, and then I was there for over 10 weeks with her. And so I really got to know these people that were going through these same things, moms of children who were going through it. And the support is just huge. And it's something you don't have in the beginning. We didn't have it when we were at home. We didn't have that until we made it to this clinic. And I think that that's part of the hardest, because you don't really have somebody emotionally and socially to help you navigate through your feelings, or even just to hold you and say, it's okay to feel this way. And so you doubt yourself. Is it okay for me to feel this way? I don't know. I've never lived this before. And I just didn't anticipate how hard it was to come home. And the thing is we've stayed in contact with, she still is in contact with a lot of the children. There's a lot of kids at this clinic, and she's still in contact with them. And I'm in contact with a lot of the parents and the people themselves who have gone through it. And they all say the same thing. I wasn't ready to leave my community. I didn't know what it was going to be like to leave my community. And I desperately miss that community, because you bond over such a traumatic, rare disorder that most people don't even understand.
And it's probably not something while you're there and you're hearing this wonderful news about your daughter or your child that you would even think like you're going to be feeling like this later. You know, you're just so happy. And then you just, like you said, you're ripped from a situation where you are supported and everybody understands to going back to normal. And it's just something that you wouldn't expect. Judah, how has your perception of yourself changed now that you're in remission? How do you feel about yourself?
This one was a bit of a harder one, because it kind of during it I kind of have differentiated myself between 3 different periods of, like, in the beginning being this extroverted younger kid who just wanted to make friends with everybody who she met, even if she never asked their names, to becoming such a closed off, away from the world, avoiding it, like really most social interaction that wasn't people at school, and just kind of hiding away from it, to having to come back from that and figure out who I was and who I'm supposed to be, because I don't have the same fearless nature of walking up to everybody and saying hi as I did when I was a lot younger, because I've seen the other side of people a lot more, and I've seen the people who don't act nice, or who really don't really care about you, or who are just looking for reasons to place blame on you, or just trying to tell you to forget about pain that you have. And it gives me a much more cynical view on people now, because now I'm like overhearing like other girls my age all complain about the fact they got dirt on a Lululemon skirt when they're at summer camp. And I'm over here just like getting frustrated, because I'm just happy I'm able to wear normal clothes without worrying about pain. And they're over here complaining when they chose to wear that skirt to an outdoor summer camp. And so it's definitely made it a lot harder, because you start seeing a lot of the flaws in the way a lot of other kids my age think. And now I'm just kind of like, it's scary to go out there and make friends. But I'm also learning that I need to like interact with people who aren't my family, because I've ended up having like a fully charged social battery now, but nobody to spend it on. And so, like, I'm getting lonely, because I realize closing myself off is not that much of a good thing, because now I'm, like, over here, like, I have nobody to talk to anymore. So it's definitely a lot harder with the perception of self.
And I think that makes total sense. And I agree with you. You know, this happened to you, and now you see the world in a different way, and that's okay, you know? I love that you think that the Lululemon dirty skirt is not a big deal. That's the way everybody should feel, Judah. The last question that we'll talk about, and this is for both of you, is what has it been like to reintegrate into activities and routines that you missed out on during your illness, sorry. And are there any social situations that are more difficult or just different in general now?
I think it's been actually kind of easy to get back into activities or even to start trying new activities because I'm no longer worried it's just gonna act up or cause pain. And so it's a little bit more of that fearless of I can try all these new things because I've spent the last 3 years having to hide away from everything. And now I know it's no longer gonna hurt me. Besides from me maybe tripping and falling, the occasional like skin your knee type. Um I feel like so while those acts have been easy, social situations have not gotten easier. If anything, it's like coming back from being behind a wall and realizing how awkward you are around people, even though you want to be around them. I don't understand how to read social cues like anymore, or I don't even think I ever did because I was just the extrovert, talk about everything. And so being like older as like a teen and going into high school, uh, as mom said, teens are usually not super nice to people who are don't act a certain way or don't look a certain way now. And so it's definitely a lot harder to go out there and try to put myself on the line because you understand how a lot of people might react to you because you are a bit awkward. You're a bit really loud talker. Like mom has to tell me to quiet down when I'm not even realizing I'm being loud because I get so excited I start yelling without realizing. And so it's like that, but also trying to put myself out there because I really, really want new friends now. But a lot of teens either don't know how to hold a conversation or will not be willing to hold a conversation with me. And so it's definitely a lot harder with social situations because coming back from just hiding away and becoming an extrovert again is a lot harder.
Well, and a lot of people got to know her when we moved here as an introvert because she did lock herself away and she put a wall up. And so now she's having to overcome those kids that did try in the beginning to be a friend to her. And it's not that she wasn't friendly with them, it's just that she locked herself away. And so she's seeing the repercussions of those choices that she made when she was going through this illness, and also how teenagers, and preteens don't understand what she was going through and why she locked herself away. And so they don't know, how to react now. So she's definitely going to have a lot of growing this year as she walks into high school, but she's walking into high school pain-free. So in remission,
Absolutely.
we did come home with some things when you were talking about routine. So she has some equipment. We brought home some medical equipment that she has to do. So she has to do vagal nerve stimulation twice a day. And then she does a microcurrent machine twice a week. And we go back in 6 months she'll redo all of her treatments for that whole week.
It's fun.
Yeah, I know she's super excited about that. But before we go, Christy, I did want to ask this last question of Judah. So, Judah, when you were looking over your journey from when we received your diagnosis of CRPS to today, when you're living life in remission, what message or advice would you like to leave with, say, our listeners, especially seeing as most of them are going to be nurses and other healthcare professionals? So those people who are really supporting patients like you and families like ours who are going through similar experiences.
I think one of the biggest things as like the nurses is especially at our where went into remission, we had such a big community. And it wasn't just among the patients, it was among the doctors and the nurses who were working there because they actively worked with the patients. You could tell they wanted to get to know you and they wanted to help you. And they were willing to push you. They would joke around with you, they would playfully insult you if you insulted them back. You could crack jokes, you could tell them about what you're doing, they'd ask what you were doing. You get to learn about their own family and they learn about you, and it's one of those deeper connections because you don't have to you don't have to go through that experience to be able to develop a connection with these people or other people who are going through this disease, but you have to be willing to like listen and care for them. And I think that was one of the hardest things because going through all the different treatments I did, you meet people who are basically just there, who are stuck in the mindset of, you're going to have to live with this forever, learn to deal with it. And so they're going to treat you snappily. They're going to treat you if you start crying or going over it. they're not going to be too kind about it, because you have to get over and learn to deal with it in the real world. And so you meet people like that, and some of them might have good intentions, but things like that can hurt more than they help. And then you meet people who really who like enjoy hanging out with you, but they don't know how to fix this type of thing. They can't quite do anything, but you have the people who are willing to try, to push you in physical therapy and stuff. And then you meet the people who actually know what they're doing and are really there to connect with you. And so even if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know much about it, try to connect, become friends, work for your patient. Because when you just stand there and just watch them or treat them as a case study, but don't actually do your own research to try to help them and connect with them, it hurts more than it helps.
Absolutely. And what I would say to this is, going through something like this, when, as I said before, when you look at CRPS, they say that there's no known cure, and insurances only pay for your Band-Aid treatments, physical therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, ketamine drops, opioids, spinal cord implants. And all of those things only treat as a Band-Aid. And Judah has her whole life ahead of her. And those were options that we didn't want for her. But that's all that insurance will cover. So we had to look outside of the box and look for how we could treat the root cause, which was the nervous system. And we spent upwards of $75,000 in order for her to be sitting here on this podcast to say that she is in remission. And insurance has paid none of it. So if you're a healthcare provider who has sway with healthcare policies and government, we have to do better with requiring our insurances and requiring our federal government organizations to look at what actually works to treat root causes. Because every child and every adult that is suffering from something like this deserves to also be able to have treatment that will put them in remission, that has been shown, where the evidence shows that it works, rather than continuing to push paying for only Band-Aids.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you both for being here. And Judah, I'm over the moon happy for you and
Thank
for your
you.
remission diagnosis. And I just want to let all of our podcast listeners know, this is a full series, and we did have a series prior to this about 6 months ago that I encourage you to listen into as well as to explore many of the courses that we have available on elitelearning.com to help you grow in your careers and earn CEs. Thank you so much.
This podcast featured content from an accredited CE activity provided by Calibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits. Take your learning to the next level by subscribing to more podcasts on compelling healthcare topics.